You think the internet is in the air. You think it's a cloud. You think your data flies through satellites, bounces between towers, and lives somewhere abstract that nobody really owns and nobody can really break. Every part of that is wrong. The internet is wet. It is on the floor of the ocean. It is roughly 550 glass threads, some of them thinner than a garden hose, lying in trenches that a fishing trawler can rip open by accident on a Tuesday afternoon. And the people who own most of it are not your government. They are 4 American companies you already pay every month. Here is what this video will prove. Around 99% of all data crossing oceans moves through submarine fiber-optic cables. Satellites are not the backup. The network is not a mesh, it is a handful of corridors. Redundancy as marketed is often 4 cables in the same trench. The repair fleet is older than the web. 4 US hyperscalers control roughly 71% of international subsea capacity usage. And the high accident rate on the seabed is not a comfort. It is the perfect cover for sabotage. Every soft landing you reach for in the next 15 minutes will be removed before you get there. The cloud is a lie. When you send a message from New York to London, it does not fly. It does not bounce off a satellite. It crawls through a glass thread the thickness of a garden hose, sitting on the floor of the Atlantic Ocean, sometimes 4 kilometers down in the dark. Roughly 99% of all intercontinental internet traffic moves this way. Your bank transfers, military communications, the video you are watching right now. All of it is glass on the seabed. The word cloud was a marketing decision. Someone chose it because it sounds weightless and everywhere and safe. The actual system is heavy and concentrated and exposed. About 550 cables. That is the entire global backbone. You could fit the names of every one of them on a single sheet of paper. The next time someone tells you your data is in the cloud, ask them which ocean. The intuitive read is that the internet is wireless. The operational reality is that wireless is the last few meters of a stack that ends underwater. Wi-Fi gets you to a router. Cellular gets you to a tower. After that, almost everything you do is fiber. And once your data needs to cross an ocean, it is fiber on the seabed or it does not move. This is not a minor correction. It is a category error. You have been thinking about the internet as a service. It is a physical machine. It has weight, it has location, it has owners, and it can be cut. The cost of this section is the metaphor itself. You can no longer say cloud and mean anything technical. From this point forward, when you hear cloud, hear ocean. The first place your mind retreats when cables enter the conversation is satellites. Starlink, the thousands of objects in low Earth orbit that supposedly route around any failure on the ground. Stop. Starlink is not your backup. In January 2022, an undersea volcano erupted near Tonga. The country's single submarine cable broke. Tonga went dark. Not slow, dark. For weeks, an entire nation of about 100,000 people had no functional internet. Satellites were deployed. They did not restore the country. They gave it a trickle. Emergency rationed bandwidth, prioritized for government and aid workers. Ordinary citizens went without. A modern transoceanic cable carries between 200 and 400 terabits per second. The total capacity of every commercial satellite in orbit combined is orders of magnitude smaller than that. Satellites are a complement to the cable network, not a replacement for it. The next time someone tells you space will save the internet, remember Tonga. 1 cable, weeks of darkness, with satellites overhead the entire time. The intuitive read is that satellites are a strategic redundancy layer waiting in orbit. The operational reality is that satellites are optimized for last mile and regional access, and they depend on terrestrial gateways to interconnect with the fiber backbone in the first place. Cut the cables and the gateways still need cables. There is a math problem here that no marketing copy can hide. A single new transoceanic cable carries hundreds of terabits per second. Tens of thousands of satellites combined cannot match what one ship lays in a month. The cost of this section is your escape hatch. You walked in believing space was the answer if the ground failed. You leave knowing space cannot carry the load. There is no orbital plan B. If you have ever seen a map of submarine cables, it looks reassuring. Hundreds of colored lines crisscrossing every ocean. It looks like a mesh. It looks like a system that could lose any single line and barely notice. That map is designed to lie to you. One narrow strait between Yemen and Djibouti carries about 1 in 6 of all internet packets on Earth. It is called Bab el Mandeb. Roughly 17% of global internet traffic passes through it. Up to 90% of all data moving between Europe and Asia transits this corridor. A handful of cables, one contested strait. The Houthis are active in this water. Iran is across the Gulf. Saudi Arabia and the UAE are next door. Almost no one is guarding these cables because there is no one whose job that clearly is. Imagine if 17% of global shipping passed through one strait that nobody patrolled. You would call that a crisis. The internet has the same choke point, and most people have never heard of it. The intuitive read is that hundreds of cables on a map mean hundreds of independent paths. The operational reality is that those cables bunch into a small number of corridors because the seabed is permissive there, the landing rights are cheap there, and the political risk is just barely tolerable there. Bab el-Mandeb, the Luzon Strait, the English Channel, Singapore, Egypt's Suez Crossing, Marseille, a few US coastal clusters. That is most of the world's intercontinental traffic. The map shows you diversity of endpoints. It hides the diversity of routes because there isn't much. The cost of this section is the mesh. You walked in picturing a web. You leave picturing a few corridors. Everything else is decoration. Now you are reaching for the next reassurance. Even if traffic concentrates in corridors, surely the cables within a corridor are spread out. Surely if one is cut, the others carry the load. That is what redundancy means. It is not what redundancy means here. Your redundant internet cables, the ones the operators promise are independent paths, are sometimes buried in the same trench. A single anchor drag can take out 4 cables at once. Not because anyone planned it that way, because route economics push cables toward the same permissive seabed, the same cheap landing stations, the same tolerable jurisdictions. In December 2006, a single earthquake off Taiwan severed 8 cables at once. Hong Kong's internet to Southeast Asia collapsed for weeks. In 2008, a few cuts off Egypt crippled the entire Middle East and South Asia for days. In 2024, multiple cables in the Red Sea were cut amid Houthi activity. Routing protocols cannot conjure capacity that does not exist. Redundancy is a word operators sell. The trench is the truth. The intuitive read is that redundancy is an engineering reality. The operational reality is that redundancy is a marketing claim that holds for single cuts and collapses under multi-cable events, and multi-cable events keep happening. Taiwan 2006, 8 cables in one earthquake. There are more nuclear reactors operating on Earth than there are ships that repair the internet. Roughly 60 cable maintenance ships in the entire global fleet. About 440 operating nuclear reactors. The infrastructure that keeps the world online has fewer dedicated repair vessels than the infrastructure that produces nuclear power, and most of those ships are older than the web itself. About 80% of the fleet was built more than 20 years ago. 12% are over 40. If you value calm, in-depth explanations like this, subscribe to Beneath Systems for more videos that uncover the systems shaping our world. When a cable breaks in the Red Sea, the ship that comes to fix it might be as old as the network it serves. Egypt, 2008. The Middle East and South Asia, dark. Tonga, 2022, 1 cable, weeks offline. The Matsu Islands, 2023, 2 cables severed in 6 days, 14,000 people stranded. That area had been cut 27 times in the previous 5 years. Red Sea, 2024, multiple cables, active conflict zone, repairs delayed by the conflict itself. Routing protocols redistribute traffic across capacity that physically exists. If 3 cables in a corridor are cut, no protocol creates a 4th. The cost of this section is the word redundancy. You walked in trusting it, you leave knowing it describes the brochure, not the trench. You assume that when something breaks, ships are dispatched and it is fixed quickly. Hours, maybe a day or 2. The system has slack. It has buffer. It has recovery. It does not. The longest internet cable repair completed in 2023 took 947 days. That is 2 years and 7 months to fix 1 cable. Not because the engineering is impossible, because the right ship was not available, because the weather window did not open, because the country whose waters held the break would not grant permits, because the crew that knew that specific splice was finishing another job 2 oceans away. There were 206 cable repairs in 2023 across 136 jurisdictions. Average response times have more than doubled in a decade. The system that runs your bank, your government and your military runs on a maintenance fleet so thin that one job took nearly 1,000 days. The intuitive read is that repair is fast and routine. The operational reality is that repair is a slow, capacity-constrained process running on a fleet that is quietly dying. By 2040, around 64% of the current fleet will reach end of life, replacing the fleet at the level needed to sustain current service costs, roughly $3 billion in new ships. That investment is not happening at pace, because the ships are owned by private maintenance consortiums whose margins do not reward overcapacity. They are rewarded for utilization. A ship sitting idle, ready to respond fast, is a ship losing money, so the slack does not exist. The system is run lean by design, and the design assumes most days will be fine. Most days are. The cost of this section is the assumption of recovery. You walked in believing breakage was bounded by quick repair. You leave knowing repair is the bottleneck, not the cables. Now the question shifts. If this system is so critical, surely governments own it. Strategic infrastructure is national infrastructure. The military runs on it, the central banks run on it, the intelligence agencies run on it. So who owns it? 4 American companies own most of the world's internet backbone. Google is involved in around 33 submarine cables, Meta around 15, Microsoft 5, Amazon 4. Together, those 4 companies drive roughly 71% of international subsea capacity usage. 10 years ago, that share was about 10%. The shift happened in a decade with no public moment, no election turned on it. Your government, your military, your central bank, all run on routes those 4 companies decided to build. In places those 4 companies decided were commercially attractive. NATO did not stand up its maritime center for the security of critical undersea infrastructure until 2024. The internet is not state infrastructure. It is corporate infrastructure that states are tenants on. The intuitive read is that strategic infrastructure is controlled by states. The operational reality is that the world's most strategic communications layer is privately owned by 4 US corporations, and states depend on those corporations for everything from swift settlement to military command and control. This was not stolen, it was built. Hyperscalers needed bandwidth between their data centers that exceeded what telecom carriers were laying, so they laid their own, quietly, profitably, and without anyone in any parliament noticing the moment when public dependency on private infrastructure became total. The cost of this section is the assumption of state sovereignty over the network. You walked in thinking your government controlled the pipes. You leave knowing your government rents them. In December 2006, an earthquake off the southern coast of Taiwan cut 8 submarine cables at once. Hong Kong lost most of its internet connectivity to Southeast Asia. Banking systems went down. Stock trades failed to settle. It took weeks to restore service, months to fully repair the cables. One earthquake, 8 cables, one of the most connected regions on Earth, offline. The reason it took that long is the same reason it would take that long today. The repair ships were elsewhere. The weather was not cooperative. The cables were clustered in the same seismic corridor because that corridor was cheap to lay in. The 2006 Taiwan event is not history. It is the template. The last reassurance you will reach for is intent. Even if the system is fragile, even if it is concentrated, even if it is privately owned, who would actually attack it? Cable cutting sounds like a Tom Clancy plot. It is not a plot, it is a capability, and the capability is being exercised. The cables connecting Taiwan's Matsu Islands to the main island have been cut 27 times in 5 years. 27. Beijing's official position is that these are accidents, fishing boats, anchors, the currents. The pattern says otherwise. The Matsu Islands sit a few miles off the Chinese coast. They are Taiwanese territory. Cutting the cables isolates them, tests Taiwan's response, and hides under the cover of an industry where 70% of all faults are genuinely accidental. A deliberate cut and a dragged anchor look identical on the seabed. That is the point. Russia's Gugi Directorate operates specialized seabed vessels, the Yantar and the Belgorod among them, repeatedly flagged near cable corridors in the North Atlantic, the Baltic, and elsewhere. China is rapidly expanding its cable laying and marine research fleets and uses cable contracts as instruments of influence across the Pacific. 70% of all submarine cable cuts are caused by accidents. fishing boats, dragged anchors. That is not a comfort. That is the perfect cover. A deliberate cut by a state actor looks identical to an anchor incident. There is no forensic difference visible from the surface. The seabed is dark, deep, and unmonitored. By the time a repair ship arrives weeks later, the cause is whatever the most plausible story says it was. The high accident rate is not evidence that the seabed is safe. It is the noise floor that hides the signal. Every adversary planning a gray zone operation against the global internet has been handed a baseline of plausible deniability, free of charge, by an industry that loses cables to fishermen on an almost weekly basis. The accidents are real, so is the cover they provide. The intuitive read is that cable sabotage is theoretical. The operational reality is that it is an ongoing capability, conducted under the noise floor of routine accidents against infrastructure that nobody has clear jurisdiction to defend. The cost of this section is the assumption of safety through obscurity. You walked in thinking nobody would attack the seabed because nobody really cared about it. You leave knowing the people who care about it are precisely the ones you should be worried about, and they have been working there for years. Let me put the corrected model in front of you in one breath. The internet is not a cloud. It is roughly 550 glass threads on the ocean floor, clustered in a few narrow corridors, owned mostly by 4 American companies, repaired by an aging fleet too small for the job, in waters patrolled by adversaries who can cut a cable in a way that looks exactly like an accident. Every layer of comfort you arrived with has been removed. The cloud is wet. Satellites are not the backup. Redundancy is in the same trench. Repair takes years, not hours. Your government does not own this, and the people who might attack it have already started, hidden inside an accident rate that gives them cover. The asymmetry is the point. Adversaries already know this. Hyperscalers already know this. Cable maintenance executives already know this. Defense planners are starting to know this 4 years late. The viewer of this video did not know this. That gap between who understands the wet machine and who still believes in the dry metaphor is the strategic exposure, not the cables themselves, the belief that they are not there. The cloud is a lie. The ocean is the truth. And the system that runs your life is one bad week of anchors away from teaching everyone that lesson at once. If this video gave you a clearer way to understand the world beneath the surface, subscribe to Beneath Systems for more deep dives every week.